Quite a while ago, I found myself being offered a night of casual sex. The offer was made while I rode the elevator to my hotel room, by a young woman who was featured at the conference I was attending. Being non-white, the reasons for rejecting the offer were many, especially since the woman who made the offer was a white woman. She drunkenly, though politely, offered me a cup of coffee in her hotel room. A euphemism for a casual sexual encounter, which I just as politely declined, citing the late hour and the long day that I had endured as reasons. Let me first say that I do not speak for others of my ethnic group, nor do I speak against Caucasians when I say that such offers are ones that non-whites would be well advised to avoid. Not because whites are the devil, or non-whites the angels, but because human nature, being what it is always wary of change, difference, or deviations from the norm, and such things as miscegenation are oftentimes viewed rather dimly by outsiders, and even by rational people who consider themselves to be egalitarian and non-judgmental, especially when they involve non-whites. It came as little surprise, but given the venue, a distinct disappointment, when I learned from some acquaintances I'd made at the conference, that it was I, who in fact had propositioned the young woman, and it was I who had had my advances rebuffed. It would later come to pass that I became the subject of more than one blog post, and at least a dishonorable mention on many feminist blogs, including free thought blogs. Even though no one knew who I was, nor anything about me. Please recall that it was I who spurned the advances of an intoxicated strange white woman who I knew only by reputation, and not, as some have claimed, the other way around. Long story short, I was propositioned by a white woman in an elevator, and it was I who said no thank you. Someone, presumably the young woman, as there was no other witness to these events, told her own friends and acquaintances that it was I who propositioned her. I suspect that she was a bit embarrassed at having her advances spurned, and to save face, concocted the story that it was I who approached her. To be honest, her behavior at the time was a bit perplexing, since the only person who knew of her embarrassment, which was evident to me at the time, was me. It is only later that I learned that gender feminists and members of the so-called manosphere routinely engage in such displays of prevarication in order to gain publicity, money, or both. Would that the ramifications of such behavior were limited to the virtual world, but that is a story for another day. Even though a few years have passed, and I've been silent the entire time, it seems to me way past time to say something about what I have identified as the cause of this entire fiasco. Gender feminism. Let's be clear, I do not hate women. I am not a devotee of the pseudo-religion of Evo Psych. I am not a racist or a biological determinist. I am not a conservative, let alone a Christian one. I am obviously not white. I am not divorced or separated, I am happily married and don't beat my wife, my 3 children, or dogs. I am not MGTOW. I am none of the stereotypes that people have used against me over the past 2 or 3 years. I was raised by a single mother, as so many minority men of my generation were. She is still a strong and hard-working person who taught me to respect all human beings, including women. She accomplished a great deal with very little. While working 2 jobs she raised 3 sons and a daughter, none of whom ended up where the statistics say they should have, and with that she taught me that women are indeed quite capable of competing with men when they choose to do so. But I digress. One strong reason for declining the invitation from the young woman who propositioned me, other than the fact that I was, and still am, married, was the fact that she'd been drinking so heavily that she swayed a little as she invited me for coffee. In fact, she swayed when not holding onto something. Feminism didn't teach me not to take advantage of drunks. My mother did, and she is no feminist. No one should ever infer from this blog that I am a misogynist, though of course, some will. Some will also claim that I loathe myself, as a man. Neither of these 2 positions have any merit. There will be shaming language, abuse, insults, and perhaps even threats of violence, none of which are valid responses to what I am saying here. What I do dislike are people who position themselves so they can take advantage of others, then systematically abuse the trust of people who look to them for leadership. I have spent the better part of 3 years researching feminism, feminist causes, and feminist ideology, from the other ways of knowing of someone like Luce Irigaray to the pseudo-intellectualism of Anita Sarkeesian, content in the anonymity that I was so generously afforded by the internet rumor mill for which I'd become grist. In the wake of everything that's happened to both me and my family, I could not have asked for more, especially given the fact that I have, however unintentionally, helped my ideological foes feed the moral panic machine they run. I'm certain my silence has also helped to feed their bank accounts. For that I make no apologies. I have a family to consider, and their safety will always come first. That being said, I cannot remain silent any longer. I see the widening rift being created by both traditional and secular religions, and must contemplate the unpleasantness of knowing that if we do nothing, my daughters, in order to survive in the feminist utopia that is now looming on the horizon, must either become weak-willed, irresponsible adult-sized children or be branded sister punishers or chill girls. I also am discomfited by the prospects that will be afforded to my son as he grows. He must remain quiet, acquiescing to the demands of these adult-sized women children, no matter how ridiculous, or face the possibility of being robbed of his livelihood, like the young man fired for making a dongle joke later reported by Audrea Richards, or worse, robbed of his freedom by a college sexual encounter that is subsequently regretted by whoever he chooses to share his bed with. He will be called a rape apologist or a misogynist for respecting evidence and refusing to jump to the conclusions that Schrodinger's rapist demands. My son was not born with original sin, and he was not born with a proclivity to rape. He was born male. Just as I was born non-white and many whites wished me to think of myself as having the mark of Cain, so too do feminists demand that men acknowledge some deep fundamental flaw for which they offer no proof other than superstition, bigotry, and hatred. Ask someone named Greg Layton who has averred that men are merely damaged women. Ask Kate Harding, the author of Schrodinger's Rapist. I readily admit to being late to this fight. Nevertheless, I have decided to step out of the elevator. If anything, that is my sin. Thinking I could run from this forever. It's not in my constitution.